And here we are on another episode of Seent It. This one might actually be a proper episode, Dalan, because we are talking about, anytime we talk about Seent It, and I think it's been mostly off wax, but Joe's like, Carlos, what is the point of Seent It? I'm like, I don't fucking know, man. We're talking about a TV show or something. But look, we're going to be talking about the last 3 episodes of The Last of Us, the HBO rendition adaptation of The Last of Us Part 1. I'm Carlos Macias, the master of what, Dalan?
The master of, I thought of it earlier, petroleum jelly. Master of petroleum jelly.
Dude, this is supposed to be, okay, I guess, sure. Carlos,
for medical purposes.
For general purposes, I guess. I mean,
medical purposes, do whatever you want it for.
Like, be chill, man.
Just put the petroleum jelly on your lips. You're fine.
Okay. Dalan Kirkwood from Up in the Mountains, thank you for joining me, sir. And give me some wacky names. Dude, keep it, like, clean, man. You know, like, I don't understand, Dalan.
Hey, petroleum jelly is very clean. People use it all the time. Do you not know what petroleum jelly is, Carlos?
Thank you for joining
I'll take
the
that
show.
as a no.
Thank you for joining the show, Dalan. And we also got Deo Blas, the king of Mid-Bay. Thank you for joining us, sir. No, and now I hope... Well, I guess it's not the mid. I was thinking about the beam. You know how the Sacramento Kings have the light the beam now situation?
Oh,
but
no,
you're not a king.
You're talking about when they win.
No,
yeah, when they win, they have a big old beam that goes into space.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like hashtag light the beam. But I was like, wait, he's not a Kings fan. You know, you're more of a Warriors fan, right?
I mean,
okay, how about
I don't like or dislike them either. They're just kind of neutral.
They're just kind of neutral.
All
They're
right,
up there in the
Dale,
standings, but we don't need to be concerned with them.
Have you ever seen the movie Never Stop, Never Stopping?
Oh snap!
No.
It was
no.
Pop Star.
Never stopping.
All right, and I'm gonna just describe it. In the middle of that movie, one of the characters has this big old helmet on, kind of like Dead Mouse, and he's a DJ.
Okay.
And he'll turn his helmet on, and a beam of light just shoots up to the sky. You can see it from everywhere.
Oh, maybe that's where they got it from, Dalan. Maybe that's where they came up with the idea. Hey, but look, before we get too off course, we're gonna get into the first 2 episodes. We're gonna get into episode 7 and episode 8, kind of briefly, or as much as we want to talk about it, right? If there's any highlights or any low lights, as I put on here, and then we'll kind of dive deep into episode 9 for The Last of Us. The first one, of course, is episode 7, Left Behind, for HBO's The Last of Us season 1, and it basically talks. They kind of go through the prequel of The Last of Us Part 1, the video game, but that was kind of like we got it as a DLC post release, so it's kind of interesting that they brought it into the show as kind of like a bottle episode, right? But Dalan, we'll go. Look, let me say the summary, because it's been a while. It's been like 3 weeks, I think, since this episode dropped.
I remember.
So the summary, this is via TV Maze. They said, quote, as Joel fights to survive, Ellie looks back on the night that changed everything. What do you remember from that episode, Dalan? And like, maybe, if you want, how does it compare to the video game version, if that's a big deal for you?
Being that I never actually beat the DLC for the video game version, I've said this off wax a couple of times, but when I was playing the DLC for the very first time, I would get into the mall and I was supposed to like walk outside or something like that, and my game basically crashed every single time, and my character fell through the floor and everything disappeared, and I couldn't finish the DLC. And I uninstalled it and reinstalled it. Same thing happened, same exact spot every single time. So I was like, I guess I'm never going to play this DLC. Eventually, years later, the remaster of the game came out and the DLC was free. I didn't play it. At that point,
so you have no background of it. I guess that's an interesting thing. No, what did you did play it eventually? We don't need to go through your whole history, Dan, of playing video games, all right?
No, all right. Pause, Carlos. I got you. But at some point, I watched like a couple of little videos that talked about the DLC, so I didn't see everything. But I definitely saw that part where Ellie was dancing with her wolf mask on the counter with her.
Yeah, that was kind of a big thing, right? Sort of memed it or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So as for the episode itself, I very much did actually enjoy the episode because it was probably the most straightforward episode about their characters that I had seen throughout most of this show.
Well,
There's normally
it kind of has a beginning to end, kind of like the episode, was it 3 or 4, like Billstown, where it's like they're both kind of bottle episodes, but they do kind of push the story forward a little bit. But it's 2 complete stories that we get in the season, and which is funny because they definitely cut into the runtime, right? They only have 9 episodes for the season.
Yeah, I'm like, that's filler.
That's filler, but it kind of tells you a lot about the world, right? That we're kind of digging into and all that. So in that sense, I thought it was good. I mean, if you had played the DLC version, I think, maybe this is sort of a preview of what we talk about and when we talk about the entirety of the season. But to me, it's kind of like it's sort of cuts it short, right? Because in the game, you're in there. I mean, the DLC isn't long, but it's like maybe 2-3 hours long, right? So it all feels like sort of organic, and you're walking around, and it feels like it's sort of brief. So you didn't feel like it was brief? You feel like it was paced correctly, Dalan? Having not played the DLC, you thought that was pretty good about that episode?
I feel like the episode was paced correctly, with the exception of one moment. There was the moment where Ellie got mad at what is the name of that girl? I didn't play Riley. So there was the point where Ellie got mad at Riley and she was about to leave the ball, but out of the blue she decided to turn her ass around. That whole moment right there, I was like, okay, why are you leaving and why are you going back? I don't understand.
Yeah,
you just need to make up your mind.
Wait, sometimes it kind of does feel like that, right? On this TV, especially if you played the game, it's always like, but it's hard to pull those things apart, right? Like, we've lived in this world of this video game for so long. I mean, it's been out for 2013, I believe. So it's been like 10 years, right? That we've had it in our minds, how we played through it. It's a longer experience. So when you see the TV shows, like, that was kind of short. Like, every episode feels short, right? Like, everybody's like, wait, no, there was more. What did you think of Left Behind episode 7, Dale?
I thought it was okay. I didn't enjoy it as much as episode 3.
Nobody enjoyed it as much as episode 3.
Yeah. The weird thing is, I did play the DLC back in the day, but it's been so long, so I don't remember a lot of it. But from what they, how they, what do you call it, what they adapted to the screen is pretty much what I remember happening. The whole thing with Riley being in the Fireflies, being recruited in there, I think that was brand new. Was that not? I don't remember that being in the game as a motivation.
No,
for her
I remember. I guess I'm pretty sure it was. I'm pretty sure because it's part of the conflict of that. Is like, what do you mean you're leaving, right? And then at some point, it kind of even becomes like, I have to leave because they have nothing for me. They're gonna put me on shit patrol, right? Like, they're gonna get me on that, so I need to leave. That's how little they kind of respect me, right? So there's kind of a big kind of conflict point there.
But she never made it.
But Dalan was right. I was like, oh, like her motivation for Ellie to leave and like come back after Riley. She was like, oh, I fucked up. Like this might be the last time I see Riley. I got to go back. I mean, that was just kind of like a coincidence to me that they wrote in just for like storytelling plot device or whatever, just to go back and find her being attacked by the zombie or whatever.
No, she didn't come back to see her attack. She came back to the Halloween store.
To the Halloween store, which was the last surprise thing, right? So
yeah.
I don't know. It was fine. I'm glad that they did include it, because I guess it is a history and background of who Ellie is and like where she came from.
It also gives you a little insight on how they work the Fireflies.
Yeah, totally. And it was very important. I do remember listening to the podcast, and Neil Druckmann did say that Left Behind is a very important even though it's DLC, it was very important, like character history that he wanted to represent in the show, in the games as well as the show nowadays. And originally, Ellie wasn't gay. Like, he never even brought up her sexuality in anything up until when Naughty Dog decided to start the DLC for that game. So he's like, oh yeah, she should be gay.
And he's like, that's fine. We had no conversations about this. It wasn't even needed to be talked about.
But it was kind of like, it's just part of like the cohesiveness, I think, of the story. And I mean, even when you play the game, they make references to Riley. And it's like, oh, it's not the first person I killed and all this stuff, right? So it's kind of part of her development. So even these 2 filler episodes that we got, the one that was like Bill and Frank's episode and this one, even though they're kind of bottle episodes, they still give you context for the world, right? And of what it was before and what it was after and what it was to kind of like grow up, right? Even when you get to the mall, she's like, hey, look at this. And like, wow, this is amazing. She's never seen a mall, right? She's, and, but it's always interesting to me what the TV show does and the games didn't do, of course, is that they actually have like actual product placement, right? Like they actually have like Victoria's Secret, and they actually have Mortal Kombat 2 on there, where you would think in a video game they would have been able to get Mortal Kombat 2, but for whatever reason, and that's kind of one of the differences in the game, is that if you guys said you haven't played it in a while, but there's actually a QTE moment in the video game where she's doing like a fight scene. She's like, "Oh, I've never played this game, but I'm gonna imagine playing it on the arcade sticks." And you do a QTE there, and it's like, and you just hear the sounds and the kicking and fighting. You just see the reactions on her face, which is kind of a beautiful moment. But in the TV show, you actually see them playing it, right? And it's kind of like a little moment, like she's never played the video game. She's heard about it. She's read about it. She has the magazines and all that stuff speaking about it. So it's kind of a nice little moment to see that it's like they actually have legit branding in the TV show. Anything else on this episode before we get into episode 8, Dalan?
Yes. The fact that you brought up the arcade thing, and I was going to bring it up too. And it's awesome that she got a chance to play Mortal Kombat 2. But there are so many other games that were also in that arcade. She didn't touch any of them. They just sat there with their quarters on Mortal Kombat 2. She had all day to play any one of those games, but all she did was Mortal Kombat 2.
There was Daytona. There was Daytona USA. There was,
hey, let's not go down the list. But I also appreciate that that years later, no upkeep whatsoever, all those games played perfect.
Hey, Dale, I appreciate the man that says let's not go down the list. Goes down a list every single episode, multiple times an episode. All right, so I appreciate that, Dalan.
Hey man, I'm trying to keep it short for you,
all right.
your convenience.
Okay, but not when it's your turn though. Dale, anything else on this episode before we get to the next one here?
No, I liked the episode. It just wasn't my favorite out of the 9 episodes that are
3.
yeah. So I mean, not because like, well, I guess we'll go into that when we talk about the entire show in its entirety, because that was the thing that like kind of killed it for me, was just like, okay, this is not the appropriate time. I feel
it's not the appropriate time to bring this up.
No.
To bring this. All right, we'll get into that. We'll get into that. But in the meantime, we'll move on to episode 8. The episode was called "When We Are in Need." The summary for this one is: Ellie crosses paths with the vengeful group of survivors and draws the attention of its leader. A weakened Joel faces a new threat, which is, by the way, it's cannibalism, right? It's kind of introduced, which was kind of interesting in the game, right? But it's kind of towards the end, where they kind of run into some people while Ellie's trying to kind of help Joel heal up, right? They meet sort of a guy that seems like he's a good guy, and then you find out it's kind of like a Christian guy. He's kind of trying to feed his group, and he meets Ellie after she's a damn good shot after she shoots down a deer, right? And that's where the conflict is, where they're like, can we have half of it? You need penicillin. We'll give you half of that. And then kind of, it was a very action-packed episode, right? I think it's probably the most action-packed, like, the entire episode, where there was a lot happening, a lot of action. Buildings were being burned down. I think, it was kind of one of the biggest action set pieces. And I think they kind of did it all pretty well, and I think it was a lot of it was 1-to-1, and we did see, of course, the voice of Joel as one of the camp members, or one of the people that was trying to cut up Ellie. But what did you think of this episode, Dalan? What kind of stood out for you?
Quite honestly, it was actually the whole episode, simply because this is the one part of Last of Us 1 that I very clearly remember. And a lot of this happened straight 1-to-1 in the game, and I was super happy to see the way that it rolled out. I mean, the whole jail sequence was a little bit different than it was in the actual game, but it was still an awesome thing, and they gave more of the background for their little community that they had. That one guy that they ended up killing in a previous episode, he is not getting buried at all. So I just want to say he's not going to get buried.
Damn, they're not going to dedicate any time to that man.
No. They dedicated time to that man. They can't bury him because his body was eaten.
The ground was too frozen. We couldn't bury him.
Just to remind you.
Just to remind you, he's not coming back. But the rest of it, they even had the whole sneaking sequence of the the whole bar area. I don't want to call it the cafe, whatever you want to call it. She was sneaking through there. She was grabbing weapons. Lodge, thank you. But that part was basically just like the game. Those are moments that I'm looking for in this show, and they don't do that enough. And on top of that, part of the reason, actually, you know what? This last part, I'll keep until the end. But I very much do appreciate that particular episode. It was very, very well made.
Yeah, there was a lot of things, and of course it broke the internet, right? Because it was finally the moment where, like, at the very end, you see just Ellie kind of with an outburst of anger and violence, and she's the only one that can save her because Joel is very far away at that moment, right? She had to burn down a restaurant and she had to murder a man, and it was very, very violent. There was blood everywhere.
Man, Joel was still trying to fucking recover, all right?
Hey, let the man recover for a moment. But like I said, it broke the internet because, of course, when they reunite and they come together, Joel, the only thing he can probably think of saying is like, baby girl, right? It's like he finally, like, you are my, not in so many words, and episode 9 made it a little too blunt. We'll talk about it right in a little bit, but it's like, you are my new daughter, kind of, right? And it was kind of like, obviously it was like, well, yeah, of course, you're the dad, you're Mando, your baby Yoda's dad as well, so he is definitely the internet's dad, right? But that was definitely a moment where it's like, oh, okay, this is it, this is like the bonding, this is when they actually come together versus you're just cargo, right? For a while it was just cargo, but of course you see the threads of, like, they're becoming closer. He's enjoying her jokes a little bit more, right? But what do you think about this episode, Dale? What kind of stood out to you?
This is probably one of my favorite episodes, if not the favorite episode of mine in the entire show, just because it sticks so closely to the source material in the video game. I do like the character of David, but I do miss the voice of Nolan North. I don't know if guys know that, like, the voice of Uncharted Drake. Is Nolan North, right? And he's the voice of David, and he had that creepy ass voice in the game. And the David actor in the show was creepy in itself, but like not as creepy as I thought he would have been. But it was totally serviceable, passable, the whole situation, because I feel like they went a lot more on the nose with the cannibalism stuff in the TV show compared to the video game. Because, like, you'll see hanging bodies, or you'll see them, like, directly reference, like, hey, like, we eat people, like, straight up.
Yeah.
Whereas in the video game, they didn't want to show a lot of that. They hinted and alluded to it, but not as, like, as bluntly as the TV show did, which is kind of weird to me. In a game where you're violently killing all these people, like, what's the difference between, like, talking about cannibalism in this sort of way? Yeah. But anyway, that's a whole other thing.
Well, and it's one of those extremes that it's like, yeah, you're probably gonna eventually have to face that reality that is like, we don't have enough food. So what is the next, like, logical, in quotes, very high quotes and bolded letters, that's what is your next option? What is the other option, right? But yeah, they were very clear about it. Go ahead. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, no, and the only other thing I wanted to say about, like Bella Ramsey herself, like the whole entire time I was like, you're not Ellie yet, and then she became Ellie in the last, like, two, like, maybe like the last 4 episodes, and I'm like, okay, now I see it. When she started,
now you see it.
yeah, and I was like, dang, now you see the rage, you see the violence, and you just see, like, okay, it's coming around now, dude.
Yeah, and what did she say? Kind of like that jail scene, right? Didn't she say, she's like, and tell them I'm the one who broke your finger or whatever. And you get, like, that scene where it's like, it's actually on the cover.
You know it's gonna happen, like, because if you've played the game before, you're like, oh, I'm just waiting for it to happen. Yeah. But when you see it on her face, on Bella Ramsey's face, you're like, okay, she embodies that.
And it actually gives you kind of like, it reminded me of, like, the cover of The Last of Us Part 2, right? Like, the cover of the game, you see it's her, just an angry face, which I think before it even released, they were thinking, like, we need to work on the cover, and they're like, nope, this is how we want it to go out into the world, with Ellie's face on the cover.
Approved.
But then he's like, here you go, this is the game you're about to play. Spend 25 hours.
Vengeance.
Spend 25 hours dealing with some bullshit. As far as emotionally. So that, anything else on episode 8, or can we go on to kind of dig a little deeper into the last episode?
No, we're good. I think we all like episode 8 a lot. So.
Yeah, and I think you did bring up a good point as far as that episode, Dave. I think it reminds me of one of those I don't know if Game of Thrones did, or a lot of TV shows have done it. I think the last one was Better Call Saul, where the penultimate episode was like the most action packed. Everything is coming to a head, and then like the last episode is kind of, all right, cleanup time. These are the consequences to that amazing episode. This is how things kind of like how they fell, right? Like how the cookie crumbled or whatever. We're gonna show you the effects of that, right? And you definitely see it in episode 9, and which is towards the end of the of game as well. Which kind of I was just mentioning it before, but episode 9, Look for the Light. It feels super short, man. It feels super short because it feels super like there was so much that happened in the game, and a lot of it, of course, is gameplay. But
wasn't it 10 minutes shorter than the rest of the episodes? I think it was actually 10 minutes.
It might have been a little shorter too, right? Because you're going from point to point to point, right? And you're like, wait, whoa. Can we breathe it in a little bit? Can we? And I think it was very much like close to the game, how you guys were talking about 1-to-1. But that's kind of where I feel like it should deviate, right? Where it's like, no, there's got to be a little more transition here. There's got to be, even if it's outside of exactly what happened in the game, because they hit every point. The giraffe was there, right? The giraffe was there.
That was the point you wanted to get to.
And well, I mean, I'm just saying, like, it all the highlights and all the things that you remember, of course, are there. And apparently, they used a real giraffe. I don't know about you guys, but to me, it seemed a little CG-ish. Actually, I think I was watching it with my daughter, and I even kind of looked over, like, that looks pretty good. Huh? That's some good CG. I'm like, then they were like, no, we used a real giraffe. That's how good CG is nowadays.
Yeah, I can't tell anymore.
I can't even tell, because I remember looking at it closer. I was like, look at her hand next to the giraffe. It looks a little fake. And then when the giraffe takes the food, but it's like,
there's no way you could do that in CG. Like, right?
Yeah, I'm
taking
like,
the food that accurately.
Yeah. Have you not seen Jurassic Park? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, so I think that was pretty impressive. I think that's one of the big things. But of course, one of the biggest things of this episode is just how it opens, right? It opens with Ashley Johnson, who plays Ellie in the video game version, right? Who is the mom of Ellie. Who is the mom of Ellie in this video game, in the show, as you guys, the episode, as it opens up, of course, it's with a pregnant lady kind of going up the stairs, and you know, she's kind of hearing zombies, or they don't call them zombies, right? What do they call them? Clickers, right? Infected slash, I think they say clickers. I think that's
yeah, they call them clickers.
I think the clickers is okay, right? But she's basically giving birth, and quickly you're finding out, like, oh, this is Ellie. This is how Ellie is birthed into this world, and it kind of gives you an explanation as to why she's immune, part of it, right? Her mom just got bit. It's not super logical, I don't think, right? But we can try to believe it, I suppose. She's about to give birth.
It's the suspension of disbelief.
It's the suspension of disbelief. She just got bit in her leg, right? And the baby, she's able to give birth to this baby girl, Ellie, right? And she cuts the umbilical cord, I guess, right in time, or right when the immunity passed through, or something like that.
Hey man, that baby popped out. No, but yeah. it's a blend of regular genes versus the fungi, and it made it through her body just enough to live with it. So it's like her body, Ellie's body, has assimilated with that fungi. So
yeah, so that's kind of what we're led to believe. Apparently that was supposed to be part of a prequel TV series that they were working on, that they eventually scrapped, but that was gonna be part of, like, we're gonna explore who Ellie's mom is and how she became immune, but they scrapped it, but they put it into this episode. And so far, I know people online, I think it was IGN, it's like, it's canon for the TV show, but I don't know. I don't know. How do you, Deo, do you think it's canon for the? It wasn't in the game for sure, right? We didn't see it in the game.
Definitely.
But
they didn't show any of this kind of stuff in the games.
And even like a prequel TV series, they could have also said that's not necessarily canon. We were just trying to give you a taste of it. But how'd you? Well, we could talk about that, I suppose. The opening, Deo. How'd you feel about the opening? I suppose.
I liked the opening. I did like seeing Ashley like be in the show, because I like seeing Troy Barker in the show. Baker,
who was in the last episode. I forgot his name a little bit, but yes.
Yeah, and then I like seeing Ashley in there, and then I do like the little homages that they paid to the voice actors and everything. It's really cool. I actually did like that little opening where she has to like fight to survive, because at the first I was like confused. I was like, who's this woman? Like, I don't know who this is.
I had to figure out what was happening. Yeah. When she was very pregnant, I was like, oh, they're showing us.
Yeah. But like, you did have to suspend a little bit of, belief to see how the cure came around. I would have been fine just to be like, oh, it's just a a result of like a genetic like mutation or something like that, and she
Yeah.
happens to be immune. I would be fine with
Evolution,
that.
it eventually happened.
It happens. It happens for the cordyceps. Why won't it happen for humans? So it's just like
Yeah.
I was fine either way. I didn't really care
Mhm.
if that was their explanation for it. I don't know if that was Neil Druckmann's like original vision for like that TV miniseries thing, but
Mhm.
for what it is, it's set up like dang, like this is they set it up where like that the more back history you have for Ellie, when season 2 comes around, like you'll have like a full idea of like this character going through part 2.
Yeah.
So I like the setup.
Yeah, and the show kind of from there it goes into kind of like, okay, now we're back to Ellie and Joel, and there's kind of like a disconnect right there between them, where Ellie just violently murdered someone, and it was like very traumatic, and she doesn't kind of want to talk about it, right? And she even drops a ladder on Joel, and she's like, Ellie, what the? And I was like, okay, that's fine. She just dropped it because she saw this.
That was in the
On her way to
game.
the
That was in the
draft.
game too.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't necessarily on top of him,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, that was in the
Hey,
game.
my question was, how the hell did she see that giraffe?
Hey, man,
She was in that building, and she just suddenly said, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
They were on like the second floor. There were walls all around them and steps. I'm like, she ran up 3 flights of stairs.
Corner of her
and-
eye. The corner of her eye. Wait, did
Corner
they
of
go
her eye
upstairs?
into
I
a
think
wall.
she was already
Yeah,
up
they
there.
ran up.
She
No.
was
They
at that
climbed the
level.
ladder. No, they climbed the ladder
Yes.
and then ran up a couple of flights of stairs.
I guess I would have to. You look at these weird things. It's the story, man. Just pay attention to the story, man.
I was paying
But-
attention to the
but-
story, and that part didn't make sense to me.
Okay, so they looked at the giraffe.
Yeah.
Giraffe, and they moved on from there. What else happens, Dalan? Run us through kind of like what happens next. How'd you feel about like how they went through the next course of the episode?
What happens next is they get caught.
When they start to connect, right? When they connect, and Joel says it's, I try to kill myself, right? And kind of, well, it doesn't say it in those words, right? But he's like, well, this is how I got this scar, and she's like, I'm glad that didn't work out. And
Oh, you're talking about the conversation that they were having just before they got
yeah,
caught.
just before they
Okay,
got
and
caught,
that.
yeah.
Oh, I know why you're bringing this part up. It's the fact that you really see how far Joel has come in regards to thinking of Ellie as like a daughter figure for himself. And he goes.
He talks to her
goes-
way different. Like
Yeah, he goes real stark in the other direction. But the reason why I think that might even be the case is because if you recall, episode 8 was very much in the wintertime, and then episode 9 is very much in the spring. So months have passed, and they have traveled this long distance. So they've had plenty of time to really get to know each other. And obviously, they're having a lot of conversations. But my thought to myself is, what the hell was Ellie doing this entire time? As quiet as she was at the beginning of the episode, was she being all angsty the entire 3 months or whatever?
Yeah, that's true.
That's
That's
true.
true.
That's true.
That's a fair point. Yeah, but it's kind of logical thing that's like, whatever, dude, shut up, man. Like they went from that to
Whatever,
this.
Dalan, shut up.
Focus
Sorry
on the
to
story.
think.
Sorry, well, it's like
Hey,
weird logistical things. That
no,
it's like,
hold
you know,
on. No. I'm thinking about the story, and when it comes to a story, continuity counts, my friend.
Yeah, but you just saw the last episode, and now you're here a week later, or if you're kind of binging it, as I think a lot of people are gonna start binging it, right? It's like, okay, now this is the next scene. But I understand. I get what you're saying. This would have been months that has passed. What the hell has she been doing, right? But yeah, so they get caught, they wake up, and it's like we're already already through the whole episode, and we just talked about like 2 things, right? It's already like it gets to the point where Joe wakes up, right, and he's kind of like, and he meets Marlene, or Marlene kind of comes to her. It's like, yeah, she's not gonna make it because the cordyceps, and they're in her brain, and he's like, well, you have to kill her, right? Or he kind of realizes
They're
like
in
they're
the
gonna
brain.
have, they're in the brain,
They gotta
so
cut it open.
they're gonna have to cut it open, and you go through sort of like a murderous rampage montage where you're just kind of seeing them just murder, and like a one-man killing machine.
which I wish was
military
longer.
experience
I
comes
wish
out.
that was like a little longer because like in the game that was like a whole like trial by fire like kind of thing.
Hey,
Yeah, like
that was the entire game versus the entire series.
Yeah.
But
True.
again,
So
I'm gonna
what?
come
So
back
what
to
do
that
you?
in a minute.
So what do you think, Dale? Going from there to kind of like sort of a montage, it's kind of silent, right? You hear like little muffled sounds here and there, and then it gets to the point where the violence of he gets to Ellie, right, and she's on the in the surgery room, in the operating room, right, and he's like, bam, just shoots him like no thought process. And we've seen him do it before, right? But there's
No,
really
he had a thought process. He talked to the man. He asked him, But then he was like, "No, I'm not giving her up." I'm like, "Fine, I'm not gonna deal with you."
That's true.
Bam.
That's true. But there's very quick, and you always wonder. This is one of the things I think the show actually does kind of well, right? Is the fact that it's like, no, it's gonna happen right now. There is no thing, like movies and TV shows play it out. It's like, all right, well, I don't know if I'm gonna kill you or not. Like, and in this show, it's very quick. It shows you how quick he is to act.
But that was the kind of like complaint going in my head because I'm so used to watching like those kinds of scenes play out where like it's like should I, shouldn't I kind of thing, like the gray area come out. And with this, they just did not, and that's why it felt like this episode felt really short. Is because all you had was like the giraffe scene, then you had the firefly scene, and then you have the after scene, which is like him and Ellie talking.
And this episode said, "Get to the point."
It basically did that. Yeah.
But I think I do appreciate it, and that actually differentiates it from other shows, right? That is very quick to act. It happens very John Wickish though, but John Wick is its own like thing where it's of course, and you have to, or he's gonna die. He only has 1 HP. Throughout the whole movie, so he has to kind of be very quick to act.
His stamina is draining the whole time, but he keeps refreshing that shit. But he ate an apple, he's ready to go.
But just kind of like how you were saying there, it was very, very quick. It's like you kind of run. I didn't really see the runtime on the episode, but yes, it's very quick. It gets to the
41 minutes.
41 minutes. There you go. And we get very quickly to, of course, the big scene at the end where. they're finally like walking around, and I'm trying to survive out here.
Use that petroleum jelly, you'll be fine.
Where him and Ellie are kind of at the end, and she of course asks like, is that really what happened, right? Did you really think like, because he basically lies to her. Right, he's basically lying to her. That is like, hey, there's a bunch of other kids like you, and it's not gonna work out. And she's kind of like, is that really true what you told me? And do you swear that that's what happened? He's kind of like, I swear. And it ends exactly like the game. The game ends, which I think it's beautiful, man. The fact that the game ends that way is like, oh, I love it. And I had just played part 1 a few months ago.
And that's can we spoil part 2 now? Can we spoil part 2 or no? Is that not a thing we don't want to do?
I mean, we'll talk about kind of.
You're talking about it in its entirety. But really, hold on. Wait. Before you go on to the entirely, he wants to do the entirety of the season. So really quick, I just want to actually bring up the fact that the killing, for those who had played the game, the killing of the doctor was very significant if you played part 2. Because I'm thinking to myself, that's that man, and this is where it's going. Can't wait for part 2 because you see him go down, and you're like, yes. Just like in the game, and that immediate moment is a setup for all of season 2.
Yeah.
Which needs to happen. Like a lot of I know like when part 2 came out, like people were just like pissed off, and even right now they want Neil Druckmann and what's his name, Craig Mazin, to like change the story for season 2.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, you shouldn't do that because. Because Joel is not a good person. Joel, exactly. But that's the whole thing. Like Joel is not a good person. He's literally saving this one person instead of the whole entire generation or whatever like that. And he lied to her straight up. He's also killed innocent people probably. Before we even met him in The Last of Us.
Which is I do like that. It's one of those things where Neil Druckmann actually is like, I don't care what the fans say. I don't care. He's kind of like, I don't care. But but it is one of those things where they've brought it up in the show before, right? Like he's even told Ellie clearly, like it's like, oh, I've killed people that were innocent.
Him and his brother, they were out there killing innocent people because they were trying to survive. They didn't want to take any chances, so they just made their way through life of killing anybody they kind of came across.
Well, it's kind of like the whole theme last time we saw Tommy in the season, where Tommy kind of completely changed his life. I'm not that person. I'm not like a murderous person like you are. And Joel's kind of like a little offended, right? Because he's like, we did that because we had to. Right, we did, but then here comes, like you were saying, Dale. He makes a decision, basically, kind of what you're alluding to, or basically what you're saying, right? Is the idea is that they would have been able to save humanity if he had allowed her to be, killed, right? Dissected, right? She would have been effectively killed that way, versus I'm gonna do a selfish thing and kind of save her. Right, which is kind of the big crux of the whole series and the whole show, because
the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Yeah, but it's one of those things that if you're a parent, you're kind of like, I kind of feel. I think it is very 50-50, honestly, on this. I think a lot of people are 50-50 on it because like it's one of those things like I wouldn't even think to contemplate like making that decision. I would literally it would have to get down to that point and me making a decision, right?
She ain't blood. She's not blood.
Yeah, but for Joel, it wasn't even a thing where he came down to that decision. He already made up his mind. He had already made up his mind.
He already fell in love with this girl.
Yeah. He was like he already made up his mind. That's like, no, I'm gonna do this. He wasn't even thinking of like, yeah, but what about the like you're saying the many? He was like, no, this is the decision, right? But anything else on the ending there, Dalan, as far as like episode 9, and then we'll kind of dig a little bit more. We'll dig into 2 a little bit.
In this case, it's more my feeling on the ending, which was again the game as well. But his decision to save Ellie versus the rest of the world, in my mind, that's fine that she could save the world, but she could do that at any time. She doesn't have to do it when she's 14 years old. She could wait until she's 85. Let her live her life. She has not had a full life yet, and then she can go to the doctor's office.
It's an interesting turn. And eventually she might. We're at part 2, and she still didn't find out the truth. She
didn't find out the truth, and she's not dead. She can always go.
So for part 3, there's potentially a chance of redemption. I don't know if I want to reveal too much of part 2 though necessarily.
Nah, we'll talk about that for
there's a very big there's a very big kind of turning point, which I think is going to shock a lot of people, and I think they basically said they're not going to change it. I don't think they're going to Final Fantasy 7 remake it, Dalan, where it's like no, she's actually alive. What's the girl's name?
No, Final Fantasy 7, they forced that in there.
Yeah, so and they basically says like no, it's going to be and you know they've already talked about it, Craig Mason and Neil Druckmann. It's like, yeah, we're going to keep it as close to the original as possible and change some things, but I think it's basically we're gonna see the story play out, which will be kind of interesting. But just kind of to finish on episode 9 here, and you guys, I know you guys already mentioned it, how close you want it to be like to the game versus on what's on screen, right? And I have a quote from Kenneth Shepard. He wrote an article, an opinion piece on Kotaku. He said, quote, "Sorry, got one more. I had to sit with The Last of Us showrunner's insistence that Ellie, quote unquote, likes and is, quote unquote, activated by violence when Ellie's aversion to and eventual succumbing to violence is grief is so foundational to the story of part 2. And I think that's one of the things that we mentioned it before, but it's always been a little weird for me also that has been like, and you see it in the post like credits when they have Craig Mason and Neil Druckmann talking about it. It's like, yeah, you're seeing like when Joe is beating up that guard, Ellie kind of likes it. She likes it. I was like, I don't know if that was the sensation I got playing the game.
Yeah.
I feel like Kenneth is actually onto something where in part 2, like I said, there's a big moment where you're like, this is why she's doing it. So much grief and pain. And she's like, I don't care. I need to get my mission done, right? But yeah. I think they're trying to build that in towards like when we get to season 2, whenever HBO releases that. But yeah, I kind of agree with that the show's been a little weird about that, right? As far as like Ellie's like, she likes it. She likes the violence of that when she sees when Joel plays out. Is that something you guys feel, Deo, do you feel kind of like that's kind of a diversion from the game, and do you like it or not, I guess? Or just anything else, I guess, in general of the entirety of the season 1?
From when I played the game, I didn't get the sense that Ellie enjoyed violence. I just thought she was just trying to adapt to her surroundings, and that violence is definitely a tool that will help her survive. So it is a little different. I do like how Kenneth Shepard put it, though. It kind of makes sense, to be honest. Maybe they weren't going for that in 2013. Maybe they couldn't do it at that time, but it makes a lot of sense to me because the way it from when she jumps from part 1 to part 2, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. So maybe it's a way for them, like, kind of having those threads in, right? Like baked in by the time you get to part 2. But I was like, what happens in part 2 is big enough to be like, why do you need to set it up when it's like that is the setup? That is all you need to know. That is like she is in full on rage mode after what happens. Yeah. But what do you think, Dalan? Whether it's this or just kind of like, I know you guys mentioned it that you want it to be like as close to the source material, but I don't know. I think it's a new medium. Go ahead, Dale. My bad. Go ahead.
Sorry. I just realized my audio wasn't recording this whole time.
Okay, well
Sorry.
we got
Oh my
we
god.
got video.
Okay,
We got,
as
it's
long as you
gonna
got
be a
video.
little
Okay.
echoey, I think,
Sorry.
but we
God
got
damn
video.
it.
Just click on it just in case. Okay, so little technical issues there.
Sorry.
But we should be okay. That's why we got the video backup. But yeah. So Dan, what do you think, man? What, as far as like, I know, I think both of you guys kind of would prefer it to be more 1-to-1 to the game, right? Whereas I like when they deviate a little bit. I like when they're like not exactly.
So I'm gonna bring up two major points in this regard for myself, because you guys touched base on it. I didn't get any comments in on it.
All of a sudden.
Hey, the fact that Ellie has this whole rage thing going on, there was the whole controversy between Last of Us Part 1 and Last of Us Part 2 when the game was about to be launched for Part 2, of Ellie actually being numb to violence, not exactly enjoying the violence, but being so numb to it that it might seem or perceive that she was enjoying the violence, when in reality she didn't know how to react to it because that's all she knew all her life.
Okay.
And then when they actually launched Last of Us Part 2, it wasn't about her being numb to the violence or, just being outright vengeful and having this full of hatred of being on a freaking rampage to try and, her goal.
Avenge what happened.
But in Part 2, when you're playing it, you actually feel the weight of killing a person. They make you sit in it. Like, you kill the man, you're gonna sit in it, you're just sitting there on top of the body.
Yeah.
But that was the huge difference between Part 1 and Part 2. Was Part 1, it was all the numbness of killing just regular people, innocent people trying to survive. In Part 2, it's like, all right, we know we are killing innocent people and we don't want to kill innocent people, but we might just have to kill innocent people.
They give them names in the game. They give them names, man.
And you know what? I think that's actually a pretty a good observation there.
Very good point.
And I think Part 1, a lot of it was, the objective was, we're getting Ellie to the hospital. We're getting Ellie, no matter what, we're getting her to this place, right? And you sort of have a background of who Joel was, and they get hints of it. It's like, I was a violent person. I had to do what I had to do, because remember, the very beginning of Part 1 and in the show, right, is the fact that his daughter dies, and then you go forward 20 years, right? So there's like 20 years of like, he's become a hardened person. He was a laborer. He was a construction worker, and then
now death is just normal to him.
Yeah, but you don't, like you're saying, you don't sit in it like you do in Part 2. And Part 2 is more like, it's like Ellie is living whatever his life was, right? Like, you're like, oh, this is what kind of Joel was doing, and he was like, he had to murder and he had to kill innocent people.
In the first episode, Joel is like shoveling kids into a fire, like children's bodies into a fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there was even in one of the podcasts, Neil specifically says that like during that 20-year period or whatever like that, Joel doesn't bury bodies of his friends. Like, the only time he did that was in the show was when Bill died. Or he doesn't even do it for Bill, sorry. Yeah. Like, he doesn't do it. Like, he won't spend time to do it because he's seen so much death and experienced so much of it that he's just like blasé about it.
Well, Bill, he couldn't even get to. He locked himself in a room.
And he locked himself
and he said, don't go in there. Don't go in there. Which was a drastic, which was pretty drastic turn as far as like what happens in the game. That's one of the bigger like where they kind of, it's a different thing in the TV show versus the game. It's kind of like the Bill and Frank story, right? But you still end up at the same point, I guess, or the same outcome, but it's completely different. I feel like you actually get a different story than what actually happened in the game, and I think it was sort of better for it. And it's one of the things that the showrunner Craig Mason and said, that is like, we're not gonna change anything unless we feel it's for the better. So that kind of gives you a sense of like, they know
oh man, this pod.
Carlos, you're back.
Oh yeah, I'm recording on my end, so I think we're good. Okay. And you guys, I look, just think of the profundity and how profound my statement was, and you guys can just go,
wow.
Yeah, it wasn't a technical issue. It wasn't a technical issue. But look, well, we can. I don't know if we kind of break down do we want to say that like what we felt about the entirety of the season, I guess, and then we're gonna talk about a couple more news bits afterwards.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna do.
Yeah. So we'll go with you, Dalan, first, if you like. How'd you feel about the whole season? I suppose. How'd you feel like they adapted the show or the
well,
game?
Obviously, yeah. Obviously, there's two views to this, and it's the cinematic versus the video game view. and the fact that if you didn't play the video game, then you only have the cinematics in this case. And from a cinematic standpoint, it was an excellent series. But obviously, like Ben Shapiro said, there wasn't enough zombies. But but in my point of view, because I did play the video game, for those that did play the video game, it's not necessarily about the clickers. It is about their interactions with people. However, when you are playing the game, you actually get a lot more weight for the characters themselves. You feel for them more because you literally get to see them go on this journey. During the series, there's a bunch of time skips, and it's only 9 episodes. They could have made it 10. They could have made it 10 or 11 episodes, and actually put some points where they were on the journey through like a building and ran into a group of clickers and had to survive them and hide and stuff like that. But they didn't do any of that. Any chance they had to really involve the clickers as a part of that story, which was a big part of the game. You didn't see any like real
which I think it's monsters. Yeah, and I think that's a very fair point too, Dalan. I think because I'm thinking about before what you just said, right? I was thinking it's like it's not really that big of a deal, and I still think it's not. But like, say you take The Walking Dead, which honestly to me it was good for like 2 seasons, maybe 2.5. But you see a lot of them killing zombies and them like actually like going through it, right? So and they did it, like I said, for 1 or 2 seasons, and it was still pretty good, right? Even though they were showing like, okay, this is how we kill zombies, this is how we do it. So I think they could have done a little bit more, right, of that. So I agree with that. But sorry, Dylan, I kind of stepped on your line there a little bit. But
no, it's okay. You cut out for a minute, so it's fine.
Damn, okay,
hey man, your thing is just freezing on us. But again, it's the fact that without showing that real journey that they had and showing the clickers, you miss out on a large chunk of what makes Last of Us Last of Us. Don't get me wrong, their human interaction during the post-apocalyptic era of the fungus actually being through that whole thing, that kind of gets shown, but without the clickers, you're missing like a good chunk of what makes the action the action.
Yeah.
The same thing actually happens with, don't get me wrong, I love their adjustment of making it fungus, which is awesome. But
or
you also
or whatever. Well, yeah, fungus, cordyceps.
The cordyceps in the humans. But the issue with that is that you no longer get the spores, and the spores was a big part of Last of Us as well. Like, everybody had to wear masks when they went into specific areas, and this they had to be careful of where they stepped. Don't get me wrong, again, that was an awesome change for it. But without the spores, you don't also get those moments where Ellie doesn't have to wear a mask in the spore.
Yeah, which is big moments in the game, right? Dale, what do you think overall of the season, man?
Overall, the season, it's a really good adaptation. It's one of the best video game adaptations out there. But to me, it started off like really high and then just kept going down and down and like kind of just flattened out with like a really short episode at the end. It's really
less clickers, man.
Yeah,
less clickers.
Yeah, Dalen's right. I agree with him. Just saying like we needed more of that because like the survive, like to me it never felt like they were in any danger really, because you know how the story works, like you have to get them to the end, but there's like no real danger with the clickers. Maybe the humans a lot more, but you played around more with the clickers and they are a larger threat at any given time. They were
the scary things.
They were the scariest thing, because like with humans, like they're kind of like predictable in a way where like, okay, if you're gonna have an interaction with a human, it's like you kind of know where they are or you know what they're capable of. With clickers and all those kind of random infected, like they could show up at any given time. A bloater could bottom up like a floor or something like that.
They could
that never
come out the wall.
Yeah, exactly. That never happened, and so I was just like, oh, okay. With when it comes to humans, they're definitely in danger, but when it comes to like the actual thing that destroyed the Earth, like
you don't see a lot of it.
You don't see a lot of it. So I'm just like,
you're
it's
missing
kind of
out
weird.
on a big chunk of what Last of Us was.
Exactly. That's exactly what I totally agree with Dalan in that regard. So I was just like, yeah, it's okay. And then I don't know. By the time the last episode came around, like it was so predictable to me that like I was like, okay, I get it. Humans are terrible people. Like I get it. Like you don't ever want to like interact with one. Joel was right, but at the same time,
Joel was right.
but at the same time, I was just like, I was like, okay, I kind of expected like to go out with like a bang, and the ending of the video game, because you're shooting through the corridors of the hospital, and that scene was a big pivotal scene. You spent a lot more time gelling in that world compared to how they did it in the TV show.
Well, and it gives
so,
you. I think. Sorry. Oh, go ahead, Dale. Go ahead.
And then the last thing I just wanted to say is that when they did the Left Behind with Riley, like I feel like that episode was like in a low point of the TV series already. So and it bogged it down. Like I just wanted to see them get to David's camp and shoot more people and get through that scene and hopefully do a bombastic ending.
Yeah,
and
you wanted to get them through it.
Yeah, but like I was like, okay, maybe a little earlier on, if they introduced that a little bit earlier, it would have been better. Maybe before they got to Kansas City, maybe.
Yeah,
but,
it's really
critical path the show. Just
it's really because you don't want to say it was like a budgetary, because I think HBO would have like spent the money if they needed it to. If they would have said, let's make it 11 episodes. But I you know what, I did like it, but yeah, maybe that's part of the reason that I wasn't so high on it. And I agree 100%, Dale, that it started like on such a high, and I was even thinking about like the intros. Ooh, if we keep getting these intros, these beautiful,
right?
Like,
those were
like,
really
those
interesting.
Were incredible,
actually.
Man. Like the first two episodes,
good.
They were incredible, and then we get to the first bottle episode, episode 3, where it's like, oh, this is great as well. It kind of it went down a little bit. It's kind of like while you guys were talking, I was thinking about it, and I was like, it's kind of like a Cliff's Note of The Last of Us Part 1, right?
Where
it's
it
like, we're getting from story point to point, and I think that maybe they. I don't know if like 15 episodes or anything like that, but maybe 1 or 2 episodes would have allowed us to maybe breathe a little bit more. But even in this final episode, you would have think they would have been able to stretch it out. Dalan, you said you looked it up. It was 41 minutes, or one of you guys looked it up?
No, I didn't have to look it up.
That last episode,
I was like, we're almost
like a 2-parter.
I was like, we're almost at the end already. I looked at the time. I was like, man, 41 minutes. That's it.
and you know, a lot of it is because to me, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm like, it's an adaptation. It's not supposed to be the video game. And a lot of video games, well, it's a lot of action, a lot of participation. But in this particular case, I kind of agree with you guys that a lot of the action is like you're living in it. You're noticing the distances, right? Of like, this is how far they're coming. Even in the hospital, it's kind of like, oh, he really quickly found it. Even though it's on a montage, and you kind of get a sense of like, oh, he's going through floors and floors. You could have sat in it a little bit more, right? And be like, okay, he's gonna find this person. It's like, oh, damn, he's going on a journey to get this girl, where he would have had time to think about, am I doing the right thing? It's like, no, very quickly we're gonna get him to the point and get to the end of the story. So I think that's kind of my sense of the whole series, is that it started off strong and then it feels a little rushed, you know, and maybe because it is 9 episodes, it feels a little rushed.
It is very
rushed. On a scale of 1 to 10, like what would you guys rate like The Last of Us?
I would
Season 1.
HBO's Last of Us adaptation of the game.
According to our scale, I guess.
According to our scale, it's because it's still pretty strong. I would say it's an 8. I would give it an 8. It's a strong adaptation, but you guys come up with some great points. Dalan, what would you grade the season 1?
For somebody who's never played the games, I would give it a good 7.5 out of 8. Okay. Yeah, that's true. Okay. But for somebody that's actually played the games, it's around a 6, man. Because you were really missing... No, I'm serious. Okay. The problem is that you're missing what made Last of Us fun. Yeah. It's like, don't get me wrong, you made your point in regards to the story, but you missed out on what made it fun, and you missed out on the building of the main characters.
Yeah, there was like no
crafting and opening drawers. We need a lot more of that.
There was zero crafting.
The one episode where she's going through the lodge, she had her opening drawers moment. All right,
that was cool.
She had to find a knife. She had to sneak up on this man, maybe twice.
And I think that's one of the hard things with it, though. And I guess it's kind of the things when it's like 1-to-1, which is what you guys want. But when it's 1-to-1, I think that's kind of the hard thing, where it's like, it's hard to separate it. It's really hard to separate, like, this is the game, let me put that to the side and then watch the TV show. But it's so hard. It's so hard because it follows it so closely that you're like, okay, like Dale's like, oh, I don't get a big action scene and all. It's like, well, in the last of the game, yes, you get the action scene going up to the, grabbing Ellie. But other than that, it kind of ends very like, it just fades out. It fades out.
Well, Yeah,
Go
what
go.
would make me angry is that if like people start complaining about like season one, saying like there's not enough action or something like that, and if Neil Druckmann goes back and responds like, "Well, then you could just play the video game." If he says something like that, I'd be so pissed off. I'd be like, "No."
Look, Dalan, highly disagreed on something, but let's get your grade real quick, Dale, before, and I'll let Dalan stew in it a little bit. Dale, what would you grade it? I suppose, like you said
I
on the We.com scale.
On the We.com scale, I would give it an 8. I've also mentioned that on Twitter. I would give it a solid 8. It is a really good adaptation, and we did get a really good bottle episode out of it, so I really do enjoy that. But like I said, like it would have started off like at a 9. It started off with
I
like a
think it
9
did
for me.
start. It kind of 9.5, 9. If you go back and
Yeah.
listen to us talk about it, I'm sure we're up there.
Yeah.
In hype
If
level.
if we were to like what do you call it, do this on an IGN scale, this would be like a 10 for some reason, because IGN thinks this is like God's gift to women or something like that. I swear to God.
Reasonable. Dalan,
So-
what were you over here disagreeing with, man? I let you stew in it enough.
Their ability to adapt it in a course of 1-to-1 and not have it be good. The fact being is that they've done it with many other IPs, and I'm just going to give you one example: video game to movie. Even though it was an anime, don't get me wrong, if they did live action, I'm sure they could have still did a good job. But there was a game that came out called Tales of Fantasia, and they made a 4-episode arc on it, and it was the length of a movie. It was 1-to-1, but they had to take creative licensing because it was a turn-based game. They don't move; they just swing their sword and they talk.
Was it 1-to-1 or was it not 1-to-1, Dalan?
It was very much 1-to-1, but when they had fighting scenes, they did their creative licensing part, and they showed everything happening. Final Fantasy VII turned it into a movie at some point. Then they made their remake, and they had to take creative licensing for the changes that they made in order to make it more action-packed. The fact is, they could take these games and turn them into a series, and actually, even though it's 1-to-1, they still have to take the creative license to adapt it to screen in a significantly more modern fashion for people to be able to soak it in a different form.
Look, I'll take your statement and I'll respond these two ways, Dalan. First of all, it wasn't live action, and you did mention that, so I think that's a little different, because you can have flourishes in an anime and animation that you wouldn't do in a live action version. Secondly, ain't nobody care about Tales of Fantasia, man. Don't bring that mess around here, Dalan. No one cares.
You haven't watched it, all right?
Cares,
you haven't
all right,
watched it.
Dalan?
All right,
one
fine.
cares.
Fine. I'll tell you what. I'll give you a more accurate depiction just based on that. There was a comic book that was turned into a series, and their series was 1-to-1 to the comic book, Constantine. I'm not talking about the one with Keanu Reeves. I'm talking about the one with the actual British guy. That series was excellent. Yes, I can't remember his name right now, but that series was so excellent that the station, I think it was ABC that had it at the time, said it was too dark, so they canceled the series. It was like the worst thing they could have ever did. Wow. Their population was off the charts. And it was so off the charts that they brought back the main character and put him in every other DC show.
Yeah, I mean, whatever, man. Constantine, get out of here, Dalan. But yeah,
hey, the fact is, they could do live action 1-to-1, and it would work just fine. Yeah. Yes, they have to take the creative licensing to adapt it to screen, but they could have did it just fine, and nobody would have been.
I'll agree with you guys, and I think we'll go into a couple of the news bits before we get up out of here. But even the showrunner agrees, because Craig Mason also said we will see a quote, a lot more infected, end quote, next season. So even the creators, they took that feedback and they were like, yeah, we're gonna give you more. We're gonna give you more next season. And it's one of those things where even there's got to be something that hooked people at least, right? Because it still broke viewership records, man. Like, we're talking about, like, the first premiere episode was 4.7 million people tuned in. And of course, it's an HBO prestige show. It's a Sunday show, right? It's like the biggest platform you could put it on, right? But it doubled, man. By the time from the premiere all the way to the very end, it got 8.2 million viewers in this last episode. So I wouldn't say we're wrong, but I would say, like, they at least did a good job of hooking enough people in that it's like it kept growing episode after episode.
Hey, there were two things that hooked people, aside from the excellent opening of each episode for like the first 3 or 4 episodes. For the first hook were the infected, because they're a type
People
of
love
monster that a
zombies.
lot of people haven't
People
seen.
love
These are not zombies, though. That was the big difference, is that it's not a zombie film. It was more of a monster film for them. And
Zombies.
and the second part was Bill. Parks and Recs guy. That whole episode went.
I don't know if he has that
hard.
much pull, though. I don't know if he has
No,
that
no,
much
no, no.
pull, but
He
people
didn't
It
have
wasn't
that
that
much
people
pull.
liked it though. It was that people were talking about it a lot more.
Yeah, that word of mouth was so strong that everybody's just like, all right, I need to watch this show, and then they understood.
And it could have potentially been like, Ben Shapiro, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Let me go check this out. You know, it's like one of those things. Remember when it was like PUBG and Fortnite?
Free publicity, man.
Yeah, you gave it too much publicity.
Yeah. I think it was kind of probably one of those things, and we talked about it way long ago, right? And salient points is the fact that like PUBG was like suing Fortnite. It's like they're copying our mode. And what did people do? It's like, what's going on over there in Fortnite? What's going on over
Exactly.
there in Fortnite? So yeah, maybe potentially I think that could have been it. Dale, what do you feel? How do you feel about the viewership numbers? What do you think it says? The fact that it kept growing episode after episode.
That's impressive. To retain the audience and then even grow it. That's pretty impressive, especially to keep going at the end.
Yeah.
Considering like I was already bored by episode 6, so you know.
So, but you know what? It might be because I don't think everyone that tuned in is a gamer. I don't know if they even have a breakdown of it, but I would assume a majority are not gamers. To them, they're like how Dalan was saying, I'll call them zombies, because I think that people were like, I'll watch another zombie show. The Walking Dead has been trash for years. I'll watch another one, and this one is HBO does zombies. I feel like that was literally
that's exactly the whole thing
for a lot of people, and they're like, let me tune in. It's like, I like this. They've never seen this story. They don't know that there's way more of them, and that we had a beautiful traversal through a 15-hour game or however long the game was. And I think
they probably don't even know a video game exists of the whole thing.
So they forgot Ellie was afraid of heights.
There you go.
That's right.
But it was definitely, sorry, I didn't mean to step on your line there,
no, that's good.
Deo. No, I'm okay with stepping on your line, Dalan. But I'm talking about Deo. Deo, anything else before the next news bit here? As far as
I think you're right. Like, I mean, how big is the HBO subscribers count? But I mean, that's got to be pretty huge. They're either the third or fourth largest one out there, behind Netflix and Disney Plus. So just having Last of Us displayed like on their splash page, like in big bold letters, be like, oh, people will be like, oh, what is this? And then they'll definitely click on it just to see what's about. And I think you're right. Like maybe the fatigue went away with the zombie genre, especially once Walking Dead is like was dying out and everything.
Yeah.
So people wanted a new thing.
They're kind of on a downturn, right? And I think a lot of it is like it's HBO does zombies, right? It's the prestige of it.
Yeah.
But look, we did mention it a little bit earlier, but as far as the next season, they've already said, Neil Druckmann and Craig Mason said there will be more than one more season of it, right? And if you've played Last of Us Part 2, there's a lot. It's at least, I would think, like double the size of the original one, Part 1. So I think there's a lot to that story, and you could already see how it splits into. Like when I was playing the game, that was actually maybe one of my complaints was like, oh, we're getting to the end now, and it's like, no, we're gonna give you 10 more hours, and it's like completely took a different perspective, different shift. So I feel you could see where there would be a logical split between 2 and 3. Better pacing, though. I feel like better pacing if they split it in 2 seasons. We see what they do. We see maybe they'll have a bigger budget. Maybe that's part of it, right? Maybe they were only ordered for 9
seasons.
They can split it into 3 seasons. They can definitely do a lot with it. So, but they've already said it's gonna be 2 parts. Dalan, how do you feel, man, about the fact that they're splitting into? Well, I don't know if they said 2 parts. They said at least one more season, more than one.
They actually did. No, they actually did say at least 2 more seasons. But that's the right move. Period. Yeah. The more you could actually stretch out a video game of this size, the more you could actually pack into the series itself to show more of that world. The biggest example, I'm gonna throw it out there. Avatar: The Last Airbender. They tried to fit 26 episodes in an hour and a half. Didn't work.
Man, it was M. Night Shyamalan, man. I can't. I like that guy. You know, he does actually make some decent movies. You know. What do you think about that, Deo? As far as like, okay, there's obviously it's more story, right? It's available to make it more than 1 season, right?
Yeah, I think 2 seasons is after that is the right play. But man, I just hope they cut out a lot of of part two, because part two is so much. Oh my god, I hated
It was
it.
long,
It was
but
way
they
too
have
long.
a
It was
lot.
like
They have a
30
lot more.
hours.
But they got more characters. They have more. They have more factions that you have to deal with because they have
Well,
whole
yeah,
different
that's true. That's true.
religious aspects that go
That's
along
fair.
with it.
The
There's a lot
problem
of
is,
things that they added.
right, that's fair. The problem was with the whole storyline was that I was miserable the entire time. And I don't feel misery for 30 hours.
You know what? And
I was
look,
fine with 8 to 10 hours. I was okay with that. Not for 30 hours.
You know what? And you know what? That actually goes to like the start of We Got Comms, the website, right? We actually did not award The Last of Us Part 2 Game of the Year. We actually went to Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I think one of the biggest part was that you just were not having fun in Last of Us Part 2. You were very miserable through the whole thing. It's just such a downer. It's a good game. It's a good game, and I know,
a great game.
And I know if Lise was here, he might defend her. He's just tired of us kind of crapping on the fact of the pacing and it's long and all that stuff.
Hey, the beginning was great, the middle was great, and the end was great, but everything in between there is like, I don't want to do this.
I think so, and look, I think they have a chance to fix the pacing, definitely, if it's 2-3 seasons. I forgot to mention this, but I'll mention it real quickly. And Legacy Killer HD, actually, we've referenced him before on Salient Points. He did say, quote, "If I had to guess, The Last of Us Part 2 will be adapted into 2 seasons. Season 2 concentrates on Ellie and Joel's relationship, introduces Dina, probably ending with, well, you know what? Season 3 gives us Abby versus Ellie and all of the events that happen in Seattle." So I think this man is onto something. I don't know. Do you guys feel like that could be? I think that could be a nice 2-3 season.
It's exactly what it needs to be.
There it is. So we'll see if that happens. I think that would be the best thing to kind of like, damn, this is amazing. And it ends with what it ends with, because it would be an amazing season 2 like finisher, right? And it's like, damn, I can't wait for season 3, right? Especially for people who haven't seen it. So I think they're definitely on a good path there. It's just in the game, you're like, yes, we're finally getting there. We're finally getting revenge. And they're like, nope. Let's give you 10 more hours of completely different character here. But
10 more hours on that stupid island, and you have to try to survive to get out of there.
And it's sort of like you're retreading some of the same events, and it's like, okay, an hour of this, and then we'll be back.
Right. I feel like there's going to be a lot of backflashes. If they don't do all those backflashes, you're going to be missing out.
I think it'll be cleaner. I think it'll definitely be cleaner if they do it that way. The last thing on here, and I know it's one of the things we kind of opened with, if we go back to the, like, even our first episode was like, this is Ellie. She doesn't really look like Ellie necessarily. Do we agree or not? But, you know, this is an IGN tweet. They said, speaking at a press conference ahead of the season finale, Neil Druckmann shared, quote, "We are extremely lucky to have Bella," end quote, then adding, quote, "The only way we would ever consider recasting Bella is if she said, I don't want to work with you guys anymore," end quote. So I think, and I think you kind of pointed it out, Deo, a little while ago, is that she is Ellie. At this point, you kind of have to disperse with the idea of like what she looks like on the cover of The Last of Us Part 2 and in the entirety of Part 1, right? But I think a lot of it is they're basically saying they were already convinced, right? That's why they casted her. But as fans, I still feel like she's not necessarily like there, right? But at this point, it's like this is the Ellie that the world will know, right? But Dale, what do you think? Are you as convinced as Neil Druckmann that it's like we will not recast her? She is our Ellie.
Yeah, no, I'm totally fine with Bella remaining as Ellie for this part. Like when she said like those iconic lines that Ellie says in the games, like everyone fucking accept you, Joel, or something like that. You know? When she says stuff like that, I was like, wow, that is totally Ellie down to the T. She might not have the same facial features or hair or whatever. That's kind of, you know,
superficial. It's a little
superficial.
Yeah.
Yeah, so but other than that, like if you just close your eyes and you listen to her and how she acts like how Ellie would act or whatever, she's pretty on point with her performance. So I don't mind that at all.
Yeah, and I think Ashley Johnson, she was on the last episode they did, like the HBO podcast that they work on, which is pretty good because you get Neil Druckmann, you get everyone talking about it. And she even said that she was watching one of the episodes and she was kind of like, she was convinced enough, and she is Ellie in the video games, right? Who's the mom of Ellie in the TV show. And she was like, she was saying something about like they were walking around in one of the scenes and then Ellie says like, fuck, that's some bullshit or whatever it was, right? But Ashley Johnson was like, that's what I was thinking just now. And she said it. So even she is convinced enough to like, this is Ellie, right? And it's Ellie in the TV show, right? Well, eventually I would hope we get a part 3 and we find out about that.
They just need to make her like a little bit more gritty, I guess. Like Bella Ramsey's face is too like baby. She still has like the baby fat and everything in her face, and
Okay.
it's not scuffed up enough. Like do that a little bit, and make her a little bit more rugged, and
Yeah.
then we'll see her for part 2.
We'll see in part 2. Dan, what do you think, man? You guys convinced by the end of the season, or?
Okay, so in regards to the story that you're referring to, I actually read up on the story before you brought it up. It wasn't specifically about her acting chops that people had the issue with. It was about her age. They were wondering if she was going to age out at being able to play Ellie. So it was actually a little bit of a conversation that was happening online of when they get to season 2, are they going to recast her because Ellie's going to be older? Yeah. And they turned around and said, no, why would we do that? She's already older playing a younger version of Ellie. They even had a whole situation where they had to actually put her in chest wraps to make sure that her boobs didn't protrude. Like, they had to actually do this. I was trying to avoid the word boobs, but I can't avoid it. She's got tits. But
you could have avoided that, Dalan. You could have avoided it. Maybe the first one you didn't, but you could have avoided this last one. Damn. We gotta censor it, Dalan, or something.
All right. But the fact
censor the movies and then censor Dalan.
But the fact is, between part 1 and part 2, there is the time jump, and it is an older Ellie, and she could still play the older Ellie. There's no reason to change her. Yeah. And so everybody was like, why am I going to stop unless I actually say I want to stop? She is perfectly fine playing Ellie. She does a great job. Yes, she didn't have the facial feature to us right off the bat because we had this preconceived idea of what Ellie should look like.
You were thinking Ellen Page or Elliot Page, you know how she goes by now. But you
not anymore.
You were thinking that. You were thinking
like
Elliot.
10 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have thought she'd be a good fit for it. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, but I also would have thought who was the person that played her voice again? I think she would have also been a great choice 10 years ago. Yeah, she would have also been a wonderful freaking choice for it because she looks like a damn ringer of her. Yeah. Obviously, she's got the voice, but she can't really play her anymore. But instead,
I think going forward, I'm sure we'll cover it. I would think when it eventually comes out. But I think for the most, I think we were kind of really high on the show, and we kind of brought it down a little bit. But I think I think the story in part 2 is good. It's just the pacing will do it justice, I feel, for season 2, and I'm looking forward to season 2, how that kind of plays out.
Hey, they just need the balance between the infected and the humans,
and they like I said, they already said, right, we're gonna have more infected. So I don't know, when they say stuff like that, maybe it was a budget thing, or maybe it was like, look, HBO only ordered 9 episodes, and we had to kind of make do with that, right? And we have to get through the story beats and all that. But we'll see. We'll see.
They blew their budget on renting a giraffe.
That might have been the case. They got that real giraffe in there, right?
Giraffe with TG.
There you go. So look, that's an episode of Seent It. I will see. I kind of like doing these, and I think people do like them. They get more views than Salient Points. So maybe we could kind of figure out what how we do it. I was thinking Mandalorian or something like that, but I know Dalan still has to catch up on it, and I don't know if everyone's trying to watch it. So we want to give you more. We want to give you more Seent It. But we'll just have to figure it out, because I kind of like the episode by episode thing, or maybe it's a special production by Dalan, because his thought is that it's kind of the end of a season type of thing, right, Dalan? And we'll kind of. Maybe we could do that. We'll figure it out. I'll put it out on wax. So there's pressure on Dalan to figure it out. I'm Carlos Macias, the master of polyethylene. Is that what you said, Dalan?
Polyethylene? Whoa!
Carlos Macias. Dalan Kirkwood from up in the mountains. Thank you for joining us, sir.
You're welcome for your petroleum jelly, polyethylene, man.
I don't even know what that is, man. I hope that's safe.
No, it's not.
Okay, then I don't want to do that anymore. And Dale Bloss, thank you for joining us again, sir, the king of Mid-Bay. Your words.
Thanks, you guys. This was fun talking about it. But yeah, maybe Seent It sound really good going forward.
Hey, Joseph, quick shout out because he couldn't be here. Luis, we miss you, man. We could have really used your input on this one, but hopefully next time.
Yeah, he's working. He's a working man. But we'll figure it out. Next week should be a salient point, so look forward to that. And see you guys later. Latest.
Peace.